Bezos Hashem, today's daf is Daf Ayin Zayin, and we're going to begin from Daf Ayin Vav on the base, just the last line over here. Let's make it big. Okay, we learned in our Mishnah that the Chachamim say if a guy makes a condition with his wife, with his girl that he's getting engaged to, on the condition that you have no mumim, you have no handicaps, and then he finds out that she has a handicap, so the marriage is non-existent. It's over. So the Chachamim say that's only said that if it was a hidden handicap where he didn't know, and that he found out later on after they got engaged or married that she has this handicap, only then we say the marriage is over. But if there was such an obvious handicap that everybody knew about, she's like, missing one leg, so then he can't say that I didn't know about it, because obviously he must have seen the handicap and agreed with it. Okay, hi Lewis, we're starting on the bottom of the page and we're going to Ayin Zayin Amar Aleph. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman made a statement. First line on Daf Ayin Zayin Amar Aleph. V'nichbeh, somebody who nebuch has epilepsy. A guy engaged a girl and he found out she has epilepsy. So you can't say that he didn't know about this, that he knew about this and was okay with it, because it says, the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says, epilepsy is kemuman shebasei sadami. It's like a handicap that's hidden, that we don't blame him if he didn't know about it. Bahani Mili, this was only said the kavia leizman. It's an epilepsy that comes at a certain time. In other words, maybe the girl always knew, let's say on Tuesday, she has an attack. So she hid the fact that she had this sickness from him until after they got married. So then that's called hiding it. And therefore that could nullify the marriage if he made that condition that he doesn't want to marry somebody with a handicap. But if it's epilepsy that does not have a set time, in other words, it happens at any moment, so then he must have known about it. He's been dating her. This episode must have happened. So that kemubin shebagolu dami, that's like an open handicap. And therefore, he can't wake up and say, oh, I didn't want to marry a girl like that. He must have known about it and was okay, came to terms with it. New Mishnah, fantastic Mishnah. Now we're talking about if the girl has a handicap. Now the Mishnah says, Isha older by woman. Let's say a man all of a sudden had a handicap and it was born a handicap. Let's say he got into a car accident and now he's paralyzed. So then what can we force this lady to stay with this man? He's very difficult to live with. So we don't force him to divorce his wife. It's not it's unfair for his wife to be suffering with a handicapped husband. We don't force a get over here. Why? Because a woman, according to the Tanakhama, it doesn't matter. Even if her husband is at least, a living person, she's okay to be called married than rather tend to live alone. To live alone is very difficult. So she'll be okay with that. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel disagreed. He says, when won't we force a get over here? Is bamuman katanim. Or if it's a minor damage. Avo bamuman gedolim, or if it's a large damage, then, and the Gemara is going to describe, if he loses a foot, is a large damage. If he blinds an eye, so then it's very difficult. So that's considered a large damage. We force him to give a get, and actually we whack him a little bit, even if he says, I don't want to, Beis Din has their ways to force him to give a get and absolve his marriage. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says it was born a mum. It came after the marriage. So Rav Huna Tani Noldu, like we have in our Mishnah, it says the handicap came later. Chia Barav Tani, but Chia Barav had a girs in the Mishnah, a text in the Mishnah that says Hoyu, if he had mumin beforehand. So now, let's read the Mishnah. Mandi Amanoldu, if you learn that the Mishnah says, the Mishnah is discussing handicaps that came later in life, that were born later in life, Kolshkein, certainly Hoyu, that if he had a handicap before the engagement, certainly you can't force a get over here. Why? Because if she knew about a handicap before the engagements, the Kesubos, she thought about it, the Kibla, and she accepted it. She came to terms with it. So there, you certainly don't force a get. But if our Mishnah only said a damage, a handicap that he had prior, avol noldu loy, about noldu, but if he had a handicap later on, loy, even the Tanakama would hold that you can force a get over here. Why? Because you can say she never signed up for this. So all of a sudden, he's now, after their marriage, had an accident and is missing the basic functions. So she can then, even the Tanakama would hold, you can force a get. Now we learned in the Mishnah. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, we learned in the Mishnah, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, when do we say you can force a get? Rab Shimon ben Gamliel holds by small women, you can force a get. But if it's a large damage, then you can force the get. According to the opinion that says noldu, that our Mishnah is discussing whether the guy had a mum that came after the marriage. That's the discussion of the Mishnah. So then I can understand Rab Shimon ben Gamliel's logic. The shanu ben gedolim katanim. Then you can make a differentiation between a big handicap and a small one. That means that it depends. If it's a small handicap that just occurred, then we say that this doesn't force a divorce. You don't force the guy to divorce his wife. But if it's a large one, you can force the guy to divorce his wife because maybe his wife doesn't like this, to stay married to somebody like that. But if you learned that our Mishnah was never discussing noldu, that the handicap came after the marriage, according to the opinion that had the text in the Mishnah that said hayu, that he had the handicap prior to the marriage, so then why would Shimon Gamliel say that there's a difference between mumen gedolim and mumen ketanim? Mali gedolim, mali ketanim. What would be the difference between a large handicap and a small handicap if it's something she knew about prior to the marriage? Hasavra the kibla. She thought about it and came to terms with it. So she should have to stay married to the guy. And why should Rabbi Shimon Gamliel say that she can force him to give a get if it's a large handicap? Answers the Gemara, sometimes she can change her mind. If she thought that she could marry somebody like this, somebody who's has a big handicap, but now she can come and say, Kesubos, she thought that she could come to terms with it. But now that she's married, now she's saying, I can't live with a guy like this. So if it's a large handicap, you would force the get. What's an example of a large handicap? Perek Rab Shimon Gamliel explained, one eye became blind. So if one eye became blind, the Tanakama would hold that you don't force a get. And Rab Shimon Gamliel says you do force a get. But if it was two eyes, even the Tanakama would agree that you would force a get, because that's too much for her to handle. Niktika Yadeh, or one hand was cut off. Nishbar Ragle, one hand was broken. Those are large mumen gedolim, where Rab Shimon Gamliel says you could force the get, but the Tanakama holds you can't force a get. Itma we learned. Rab Abba bar Yaakov and Rab Yochanan, halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, that a large mum you would force a get. Rav Amar Rav Nachman, halacha kedivrei chacham. The halacha is like the chachamim that you don't force a get. That's the halacha. Now, this comes up because if certain times after the marriage, the husband comes down with a disease, MS, or has an accident, the question becomes, can she demand a get? Then he has to pay the Kesubos. Big questions, difficult life scenarios. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov said that Rabbi Yochanan said, halacha Rab Shimon Gamliel. From this, it implies that only here the halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. But that's not true. That Rabbi Bachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, wherever you find Rab Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnayos, halacha kamaisei. The halacha is like him. So it's mashma Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Always the halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, not just here. So why did Rabbi Yaakov say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel over here? Rabbi Babachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the halacha is always like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Answers the Gemara, actually it's a machlekes amarayim what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Chana said, Rabbi Yochanan said, we always paskin like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Abba Yaakov said, no. Rabbi Yochanan said, only here you paskin like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, not everybody everywhere else. Now, the Mishnah said that the Chachamim held before that you don't always force a get because, if she likes to stay married to a guy, no matter what became of him afterwards, even if let's say he lost one eye, you don't force a get. But here the Mishnah says sometimes a husband could become so repulsive that she can demand a get. The following men, we force them to divorce their wives. Somebody who has a very severe skin disease. Ubal polipus. Bal polipus, the Gemara is going to say, it either means he has bad breath, or according to the Gemara, it seems to imply that he has bad nose breath, which we're going to see what that means. It's impossible to have bad nose breath, I thought what it means is that a person who lost his taste and smell, and therefore when you lose that, like some people experienced in COVID for a little bit, a person's personality can change. So perhaps there she can say that's not the same person I married, so we'd force a get. I'm not sure. V'hamakamitz, someone who gathers dog manure for working in leather. V'hamatzaref nechoshes, somebody who mines copper. V'habursi, a tanner. All these things that we said later are husbands who have an awful odor, and therefore, whether she had them before she got married, or after they got married, he decided to learn these trades, you could force a get. Va'akulam, and she could force a get. Va'akulam, Amar Rameya, even Rameya said went further. Even if he was in this profession prior to them getting married, and he made a condition with her, and then they got married, she can back out of the condition. She can say, I thought I can accept living with a man that has this awful job and awful smell. But now I can't accept it. Chachamim says, Mikabelas hi al karcha. We force her to accept what? To accept this guy. Because you made a condition. You can't change the condition you made when you were engaged. You made a condition that you're okay with his profession, even though he smells. You have to stay with the marriage. Chutz, very important. Chutz, mimuke shchin, somebody who has a skin disease. So then this is the type of thing we encourage this marriage to end. Why would we encourage a marriage to end? Because when they do tashmish, when they have relations, his skin falls off. And it's very dangerous for him. He's losing a major organ of his body, his skin. So therefore, if somebody has this uncurable skin disease, we want them to get divorced. The story in Sidon was there was one tanner, Shemes, he died, and he had a brother that was a tanner that was falling to Yibam. And his brother did not have good midas. Only her husband had good midas. So normally you could do Yibam Bal Karcha against the will of the Yavama. Amr Chachamim says, she can say, I could live with your brother despite him being a tanner because he was good to me in other ways. But you, I can't accept you as a husband. You have a smelly job, and plus you don't have such good midas. So the Chachamim will not allow him to be miyabim her and actually do her request for chalitza. So the Gemara says, my bal polipus. The Mishnah said that one of the things that you force a get is if a sudden the husband developed this polipus. What is a polipus? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel reach hachoitim. He has the pashtus. It means he has foul nose odor, but I couldn't understand what that means. But masnita tana reach hapeh. He has foul breath odor from his mouth. Rav Asi Masni Ibcha. Rav Asni had it the opposite way. That Shmuel was the one that said reach hapeh, and the Brisa said reach hachoitim from the nose. The way to remember it, Shmuel apasuk tuma mikulam Perek. Shmuel has what to say as his mouth was moving this entire Perek. Whatever daf that you learned in Perek Hamadir, there's always a statement from Shmuel on that page. So therefore, Shmuel was the one that said that Baal Polipus means a person who has bad mouth breath. Ma'amikamitz. If a person has this mekamitz profession, you can force a get. Amar Rav Yehuda zeh mekamitz sloyas kolovim. He gathers dog manure for tanning purposes. Meisvei mekamitz zeh bursi. The Brisa says mekamitz is a bursi, not somebody who works in the tanning business. He's not the one that's gathering dog manure. So the Gemara asks back, look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says hamakamitz or mitzaref nechoshev arbusi. So our Mishnah seems to say that makamitz is one thing, bursi is another thing. Not that makamitz equal bursi. So we have our Mishnah disagrees from the Brisa. So the Gemara says, our Mishnah is not difficult against the Brisa because the Brisa kam b'bursi gadol, kam b'bursi katan. A makamitz is a small tannery shop, and a bursi means a large manufacturing tannering plant. So that's what our Mishnah means. But you tell me that makamitz does not mean to have nothing to do with tanning. It's actually the guy collecting dog manure. Maybe he works for the city. So it means two different things. And says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda kasha tanoi. And the Gemara says it's machlekes tanoim, exactly what the word mekamitz means. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, mekamitz zeh bursi. One Tana hold that the word mekamitz means a guy who's a tanner. The Yeshamim zeh mekamitz tsoyes kolovin. Whoever collects dog manure, if you have that kind of profession, so then that kind of profession, then the wife could demand a divorce and he has to pay the ksuba. We learned that somebody who mines copper, what is somebody who mines copper? A guy who makes, what does Rashi say? He makes pots over here, I believe. Chashle dude means he grinds copper and he makes pots out of it. And Rashi says it makes you smell, but it also probably makes you become black. If you work with copper, your whole skin becomes black. So that's why that's not a good profession. If a person who's like a Chilean miner, he's actually mining copper from its source. What is called the mitzaref? If he has that profession of what? Of mining copper from its source, that is somebody who has a bad profession, and we force a divorce in that case. Amar Rav says, now Rav is talking about, let's say, a narcissistic husband, a real nut. He says to his wife, Eini zon ve'eini mefarnis. So I'm not providing food, I'm not clothing, I'm shutting down your credit card account. And so the Gemara says, so what do we do with such a guy? We force him to give a get and to give a ksuba for his wife. So Rabbi Lazar said over what Rav said in front of Shmuel. Rav Lazar said, and he said it in the name of Rav. So Shmuel said, feed a Lazar animal food. You understand? Because I guess what he's trying to say is, why do you force the guy to give a get? He's a narcissistic guy. Because you think he's like an animal that he can't change. But Shmuel has a much softer approach. Before you force the guy to give a get, try to force him to support his wife. Let's bend his hand and ask him to change and start providing. Rav, why did Rav come up with that idea? It seems simple. We don't want, divorces amongst the Jewish people. The answer is, Ein Odem Dar im Nachach Shbekfifa. A person doesn't want to live with a snake in the same basket. In other words, true, we'll force him to give her food, but she probably doesn't want to live with such a guy because he'll come back again with another issue. So therefore, that's what Rav's opinion. You force a divorce in that case. He saw like Rab Zera. Rab Zera came from Israel to Bavel. Ashker Rabbi Binyamin bar Yafes. He went. He found Rabbi Binyamin bar Yafes. The Yasser the Kamala. He went and said Mishmei Rabbi Yochanan, because he learned by Rabbi Yochanan. So Rab Zera, he's learned from the name of Rabbi Yochanan Amalei, and Rabbi Yochanan agreed with Rav that if a guy says Einim Zon, Einim Mefarnis, yeah, we force the get. This guy is too narcissistic. So Amalei, so So Rab Zera said to Rabbi Yamin ben Yafes, on this, they already fed animal food to Lazar and Bavel. In other words, that even though Rabbi Yochanan held like Rav, but Shmuel disagreed with Rav. And Shmuel held that you actually try to work it out, that they stay with each other and try to get him to change his mind and to start supporting his wife. The Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi. Ema Ashna el Psulis. You don't force a get only if they're midoraisa not supposed to be with each other. Like the Gemara is going to say, when I said this statement in front of Shmuel, he gave the examples. Kagoin, Almana marrying a Kohen Gadol, and Almana marrying a Kohen Gadol, a Grusha divorcee, v'chalutza l'Kohen Hedyet, marrying a Kohen Hedyet, Mamzeres Nesina Yisrael, or Mamzeres or Nasin, who's from the Shivas Amim, marrying a Yisrael. So these people are over allowed. The marriage is effective, but they're living in sin. Bas Yisrael and Nasin Mamzer, right? A girl for a Nasin or a Mamzer. So all these cases, they're living in sin, but the marriage took effect. So we force a divorce over here. But now says the Gemara, a fascinating thing. What happens? You have a guy who's lovely married to a girl, but they don't have children. A man married a woman and stayed with her 10 years and didn't give birth, and they're happily married. We don't force them to get a divorce. But what's going to happen is, by him not getting a divorce, he's going to be not inclined to marry somebody else. And because he's not going to marry somebody else, he's not going to have children. And he's mavato, he's absolving himself from the mitzvah of pruvu, having children. Rav Tachlifa said in the name of Shmuel, if we find a situation where a man married for 10 years and didn't give birth, we'd actually force a divorce over here. So Tanam, that's very interesting, because we want him to do the mitzvah pruvu, to break away from this marriage. Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, our Mishnah gives scenarios where we would force a divorce. And all these things. So Bishlam Rav Asi, according to Rav Asi, our Mishnah is discussing the Rabbanan, Ketani. When midrabanan, it's not good to have this couple together, so Bezdin will force a divorce. Deraisa, like Ketani, our Mishnah doesn't discuss if they're living in sin. What would you do? We don't mention those things, Aman Kohen Gadol, because certainly you're going to force a divorce. For a Gerusha marrying to a Kohen, we're going to force a divorce. But the Mishnah's Chiddush is that even things which you wouldn't think you wouldn't want to get involved, Mishnah says by certain cases we force a divorce. But it doesn't mention what Rav Tachlifa's case is. Rav Tachlifa Baravima, why doesn't our Mishnah mention another case that you force a divorce? Listening, you stayed with a woman 10 years and you're not having children, we'd force a divorce over here. Why didn't our Mishnah mention that case? Our Mishnah is talking about where you're permitted to use whips and sticks to get this divorce. But when a guy loves his wife and just didn't have children with him, we don't force it with whips and sticks. We actually try to talk him out of staying married, to the importance of having children, and we try to convince him to get divorced. That's why it's not mentioned in Mishnah, because it's not part of the same group. Maskif lo Rababa asked the question, you never talk anybody out of a good marriage. Even a slave will not take rebuke from just with words. And if you want to force a divorce, especially somebody who's attached to his wife, you're going to have to do it with force. So again, it should be similar to what's mentioned in the Mishnah. You're right. By both of them, we will use sticks and stones to break up the marriage. But we go to Amud Beis, our Zayman Beis. Hasam ki Amar ki Avina Badei Shafkina law. Over there, by the Mishnah, if she says, I don't mind his smell anymore, I'll live with it, then we let it happen. But here, even if she says, I just want to stay, I don't want to accept a get from this guy, I like him, so then we force the divorce. We don't let this happen under any circumstances. Because again, if you let them stay together, he'll not be inclined to marry somebody else or to have children. and thereby he's going to be mavapel from the first mitzvah in the Torah is having children. That's why in that case, no matter what, we try to force a divorce. So it's not similar to the cases mentioned in the Mishnah. Oh, is it not similar? Somebody with a skin disease, even if she says, I want to be with him, we don't let. Now we learned to the Mishnah, chutz mi mukeshchin. Mukeshchin is not part of the same group. If someone with a skin disease, because he's losing, because it's dangerous for them to remain married, because if he's going to do relations with her, he's going to have his skin fall off. And it's dangerous. He's losing a major organ of his body. So we see that in certain marriages that are mentioned in the Mishnah, we always force the divorce. So again, why didn't it mention in our Mishnah, a guy married for 10 years, not having children, we would force the divorce? And says the Gemara, there's still a difference. Hassam, by that case, ki amra, by the case of the mukeshchin, if she says, I want to stay married to the guy, but the yaruna bahade basade, there will always be people around which will remind me not to have relations. I don't mind being with this guy. He has a skin disease. I'll make sure not to have relations with him. Then in that scenario, shafkin and la, we would allow them to stay together. So most of the time, we'll let all the ones mentioned in the Mishnah, under certain circumstances, we will allow the marriage to stay as one and not force the divorce. Hacha, but the case with the children, the guy didn't have any children, even if she says, I'll live with him with Adim, and no matter what, she can't come up with any reason, with any way that they could live together. Lo shafkin Allah, we will not allow it. We want them to get divorced so that we'll give him the motivation to marry somebody else and have children. Zok the Gemara. Now the Gemara discusses fascinating things. This makes this Masechta quite fascinating. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yosi said, Sachli Zakin Echem Anshi Yerushalayim. I spoke to an old man from the people of Jerusalem. He said, there's 24 types of skin diseases. For all these skin diseases, having marital relations is very bad for it. It's it's dangerous. Ubali Rasan, somebody who has this disease called Ra'asan, that's the worst type of skin disease you can have. So the Gemara asks, now, what is Ra'asan? Rashi explains that Rashi says it's Rashi calls it a sher. It's like an insect that comes into your brain. And that somehow causes a reaction in the rest of your body. And it's like a skin disease, like a mukeshchin, causes your body to have these boils. Anyway, how does a person get an insect in his brain? The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. How does one get that? The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, hikis dam shimesh. If a couple did bloodletting, that was an ancient way of trying to heal disease, but they did bloodletting, and right afterwards, vishimish, they had marital relations with each other. Havale bonam visakim, they will have very weak children. That means if the husband did bloodletting and then had marital relations, he'll have very weak children. Hikizu shneim v'shimshu, but if the husband and wife did bloodletting, havi lein bonim bali ra'asan, they will have children who have this skin disease. Amar Papa. So that's how it comes. It's a natural thing that happened because what your parents did. Amar Papa says, "Lei amran elad lei toy midi." It's not a problem. It's only a problem if they didn't eat after the bloodletting. Aval toy midi, but if they ate after the bloodletting and then they had marital relation, less leiba, there's not going to be any problem with the children. Now the Gemara says, "My simoni." What are the symptoms to tell if somebody has this Ra'asan disease? So the Gemara says, Dalfin Einai, his eyes are tearing, Vidavia Nechire, his nose is always running, Vaisili Riro Mipimi, and saliva is always running from his mouth. And another thing, Umu Didve Ilove, and there's somehow a lot of flies around him. So therefore, that is a simon that he has this Ra'asan disease. So now we explained that it's something, a bug in the head. It's a bug in the head. Somehow a parasite entered the brain, got through the blood-brain barrier. So the Gemara says, "My asuse," how would you heal something like that? So here is what makes it fascinating, is the Gemara is going to describe here how to do brain surgery. So the Gemara says, first, Amar Abaya. Abaya says, first you make a mixture of this potion, pila, something called pila. V'laydana is landam. Girda the guys walnut shells. Vigirda the ashpa, and this is animal shearings from the skin. Uchlil malka. I have it here, written here. It's called antemisia. Maschala the dikla sumka, and that is the protection around dates when they're small. Just like it has by walnuts, there's like a certain protection, a certain shell around them. There's a certain shell around dates when they're small on the tree. Now, I'm trying to point out that some of these things, we know what they are. They're anticoagulants, and some of them actually prevent infections. So that's what you're trying to do, make this mixture. Now, look what you do. You stew it all together, make like a mixture out of it, and you turn it into a liquid form. It's fascinating. You create an operating room. Now you have the potion of this potional mix. Now you bring the patient into an operating room fully marble. If you don't have a marble room, you bring him into a room that has 7.5 rows of bricks. In other words, you want to get as much as the outside ear, protected. In other words, you're creating an environment that after you're going to do the operation, no other disease is going to set in. So now you have an operating room. Either it's made of marble or 7 rows of brick. You pour 300, I guess it's hot, on the guy's head, 300 cups on the guy's head. Until his skull becomes soft, where you can actually make an incision, a surgical incision. You surgically remove some of his scalp. Now that you can open up his scalp, you probably see the bug there. So you bring 4 leaves of a myrtle branch. You take each leg of the insect and put it on one of the leaves. Because if you just pull the bug is going to use its feet, its claws to latch on to the brain. So first you make a hefsek, a interruption between the foot of the bug and the brain. So you put it on a leaf. You just try to get the bug's leg on a leaf. Then v'shakal b'tzvasa, you remove the bug with a tweezer, v'talalei, and then you burn the bug, because the eloi, if you're not going to burn the bug, somehow it'll get back into that brain. Hadi ilove, it will come back in the brain. So that's how the Gemara just describes the brain surgery. The Gemara doesn't describe how you close back up the brain, but presumably there was a way to do that too. Now, the Gemara says, Machriz Rabbi Yochanan, this disease is catchy. So Hizara Mizvuve Shabarasa, be careful of the flies that are around the guy who has this Ra'asan disease, because the flies can be a transfer, a vector for this disease. Rabbi Zera would not be in the airspace of somebody who had this Ra'asan disease. Rabbi Lazar would never go into the guy's house or tent. He would not eat the eggs from the neighborhood where somebody had this Ra'asan disease. An egg has a shell on it, and he felt the eggs are contaminated as if somebody who in the neighborhood has this Ra'asan disease. So they totally avoided this Ra'asan disease because they felt it was catchly. Comes along the Gemara and says something fabulous. The Shua ben Levi would like wrap himself with them. He would actually sit next to people who had this Ra'asan disease. Even though it's dangerous, I don't know how he was allowed to do that. But the Gemara says he had a reason. Omar, he said, which means I learned so much Torah, it makes me attractive. So if Torah makes you attractive, those that learn Torah, agunule magna, certainly will protect me. So he felt that the Torah that he learned, which sold the Shem Shemayim, that it will protect him from catching the disease from Bali Ra'asan. Now, this Gemara describes how special this Rabbi Shua ben Levi was, that he's probably one of the only people that went alive right into Gan Eden. He didn't die. When he was supposed to die Amr leila malach hamaves zil aved re leruse. They told, the heavenly court told the malach hamaves, go do your job and do his will and bring him. Azel is do what he wants. Azel is chazale. The malach hamaves appeared to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Amalei. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said to him, okay, before you take my life, achveli duchtai. Show me my place in Gan Eden, so it'll be not so difficult for me to die. If I know where I'm going, it's not going to be difficult to me to die. Amar lechai. Okay, so the Malach HaMavis acquiesced. I'll show you where you're going after you die. Amar lei. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, I'll come with you, but havli sakina. Give me your knife that you kill people with. Because I'm afraid I'm going to be nervous in the way, and I see you carrying a knife. It's going to make me nervous. So we're going to Gan Eden, but still, I'm nervous with your knife. Yavanele. So the Malach HaMavis gave the knife that he takes people's lives with to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Kimata lahasam, when they got to Gan Eden, Dalia, he lifted him up. There was a wall around Gan Eden, so he lifted him, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, up so he can see Kamachvele. So he saw where he's going in Gan Eden. He saw over the wall a beautiful place. Shava nafalahu gusa. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi fell over to the other side, and his intention was he came with the knife with the knife of the Malach HaMavis, and if he'd stayed there, nobody would die anymore, right? So now he fell into the Gan Eden. But Nakte Batan and the Galime. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was held on by the corner of his cloak by the Malach HaMavis. He was still holding on to him. Amalei, so Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, B'shuasam d'lo yasena. I swear to you, I'm not coming out of here. So now God has to intervene over here because the Malach HaMavis, the guy's holding, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is holding on to the knife of the Malach HaMavis, and he's swearing he's not coming out of Gan Eden. So God said, if Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi in his lifetime ever sought out Heter Shvua, Heter Neder, he made a Shvua and then he backed out of it, then we'll back him out of this Shvua. Eloi, Loi the Heter. If he never backed out of a Shvua, of an oath in his life, then we can't, then we won't undo his oath over here. So the answer was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi never backed out on a Shvua. He kept his word all his life. So now he has to stay in Gan Eden. You can't pull him back out. So basically what the Gemara is saying is he basically went alive into Gan Eden. Amalei, so the Malach HaMavis said, Havli sakinoi, give me back my knife. Loi hava kiyavle. He did not want to give him back the knife. Nafka bas kalava amrla. The voice from heaven said, Havnele, give him back his knife. He needs it for other people. Anyway, the Gemara describes how Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi entered Gan Eden. Machros Eliyahu Kamei, Eliyahu said, Panu Mokal Bar Levi, make place for the son of Levi. Panu Mokal Bar Levi, make place for the son of Levi. He gets like a double portion of Gan Eden, not only for himself, but for the Shoyim who gave up their portion of Gan Eden, gave it to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Azar Ashkechel Rabbi Yeshua ben Yachai, he found Rabbi Yeshua ben Yachai, Davi Yosef Atlas Asa Tachte Pise. He was sitting on 13 mattresses of gold, something like that. He met Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai in Gan Eden. Amalei, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, Athu Bar Levi, are you the Bar Levi that everybody's saying, make place for you in Gan Eden? Amalei, so Rabbi Shimon ben Levi said, I'm the Rabbi Shimon ben Levi. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai asked them, did they ever see a rainbow in your life? In your days, did they see a rainbow? Amalei, hey, yes, there was rainbows. In other words, a rainbow is a sign of klola, that God's angry at the people. And Rav Shimon ben Yochai was asking him, were you such a tzaddik that you protected your entire generation, that no rainbow was seen? And he said, no, I wasn't such a tzaddik. There actually was, in my times, rainbows. So Rav Shimon ben Yochai said, okay, in case then we don't have to say, make room for Balavai, the son of Levi. You're not such a great tzaddik. But the Gemara says, Velohi, this was not so. There was never a rainbow that appeared in Rav Shimon ben Levi's generation, because he was such a tzaddik, he protected the entire world because of his merits. Even to be a Balgaiva in Gan Eden, he didn't want to be. So he didn't answer truthfully that way. But really, he was a great tzaddik that protected his generation, and there was no rainbow in his time. Let's just finish the Perek. Rab Chanina bar Papa Shush bin Nahava. Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa was a friend of the Malach HaMavos. When Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa was about to die, Amr Leila Malach HaMavos, Zil Avid Le Rusi, told the Malach HaMavos, do what Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa wants. Azal Gabev is Chazaleh. So Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa saw the Malach HaMavos appear to him. Amalei, so he said to the Malach HaMavos, Shvat plus Yom Adad Havid Talmudei. The Amrei Ashri Mishakan, but Talmud Biyadeh. Give me 30 more days because I want to review my entire learning. Because the Gemara says, lucky is a person who comes up to the next world and he remembers what he learned. So I want to review before you take my life. Shafke, he left him. After 30 days, the Malach HaMavos came back. Show me my place in Gan Eden. I'll show you the place in your place in Gan Eden. He said the same thing. Give me your knife. Maybe I'm gonna be scared on the way. You're gonna show me my place in Gan Eden. I'll be scared. You want to do what Rabbi Shua Levi did to me? He didn't want to return the knife. So Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa said, I see Sefer Torah v'chazi. Let's bring a Sefer Torah and let's look inside the Sefer Torah. There's something written in the Torah that I didn't keep. I'm a big tzaddik too. So now the Malach HaMavos wants to tell Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa that you're very different than Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Amalei, so Malach HaMavos says, Mi ikart b'balei ra'asa v'isakta b'Torah. Did you wrap yourself with these people with these contagious disease and learn with them Torah? Did you risk your life to teach these people Torah? So the Gemara says, no. So I don't think if he ever saw his place in Gan Eden. I think that he wasn't allowed to, maybe. Or he didn't get the lucky to go alive into Gan Eden. But anyway, the Gemara wants to tell you, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa was a big tzaddik. That there was a pillar of fire that separated Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa and the people around him. When he died, you couldn't approach his dead body because there was a big fire all around him. Ugumiri, we have a tradition, only if you're so special, is there a fire surrounding your dead body? So there's a big fire around Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa's body. Rabbi Cassandria wanted to get close to the corpse. Amar, he said, fire go away because do it for the sake of other chachamim that did not have this fire, and they look bad if they don't have this fire. The fire did not extinguish; it stayed in its place. So he said, make this fire go away because people say that you're greater than your father. Rabbi Papa himself did not have this fire around him, and you, Chanina Bar Papa, you're having this fire. So the fire did not pay attention; it stayed in its place. So then Rabbi Alexandria said, "Ashay b'svil kvayt asmecha. Do it for your own sake. You got to get rid of the fire so we can bury you." Yistalek, so the fire went away. Amar Abaye said, "Lapukin mandalei kiyam." This doesn't. This only happens only because Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa kept the entire Torah, but for somebody who's missing just one thing of the Torah, this fire doesn't appear when he dies. This excludes you, Abaya, because you didn't keep everything in the Torah. You forgot to put a fence around your roof. And we know the Torah says that if you have a flat roof, you have to put a fence around it. And you didn't put a fence around it. So he was taunting Abaya. The Gemara says it's not true. Abaya put up a fence around his roof. At that time, when Rabbi Mamash saw there was no fence, there was like a hurricane that blew down the fence. So therefore, he didn't have a fence. The final Gemara of this Perek is Rabbi Chanina said, why isn't there this disease in Bavel called Rasim? It only appears in Israel, apparently. Because in Bavel, in Iraq, they eat beets. They eat beets, and they drink beer. Shall his meat made with hops? Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. Why are there no skin diseases called leprosy in Babel? So one of the things that help prevent skin diseases is because people can bathe themselves in the Euphrates River. Somehow the minerals there protected the skin. Fantastic daf today.